Hey guys, and welcome to my Fury Warrior PvP guide. In this guide we will be going over stat priority, essences, traits, rotation, talents, and pretty much everything you need to know about playing Fury Warrior. So just starting out with stat priority, on all of my tunes, doesn't matter which tune it is, I like to go by highest item levels, probably the best upgrade unless it's really obvious. Like I have 445 boots on this character I believe, but I just don't have them equipped because I have mastery boots, and mastery obviously increases your enrage damage by quite a bit. But if you do want to follow normal stat priority, the stat priority is something like this: critical strike first, mastery second, haste third, versatility fourth, and strength fifth. But if you want to go by my guidelines, just equip the highest item level thing and don't overthink it. So the next thing we're going to talk about is essences. I am no professional on essences whatsoever. I only have 2 epics on this guide. Most of my tunes I only have epic Crucible of Flame. So most of the time I just run Crucible of Flame in the middle row because you can use it to heal yourself or you can use it to damage someone. Most of the time I do use it to damage someone. For minors I always just run Conflict and Strife and Breath of the Dying. I do think Breath of the Dying is super good on top of the corruption resistance it already gives and the damage it does. And then the versatility that you do gain from Conflict and Strife, even the lower ranks are pretty decent. If you do get to the 75 row, I'd suggest Memory of Lucid Dreams for Warrior because it can heal you, and it can refund Rage whenever you use Rampage. Again, going into the lovely BFA game design of traits, artifact traits, Azerite traits, whatever they're called. Most of the time, I just like having 1 Cold Steel Hot Blood because of the heal it gives and the damage it does. Other than that, you want the traits that give rampage damage, and I think the best one is the Unbridled Ferocity, which has a chance to pop Recklessness, but pretty much any trait that buffs your rampage damage you're going to want to take, you want at least 1 Cold Steel Hot Blood so you can proc that damage over time / heal over time effect for yourself and onto others. Having 1 auto attack Reckless Fury one isn't that bad. Itself, it just buffs the auto attack damage you do, and it also reduces the cooldown of Recklessness for every auto attack you do, so that will add up over longer fights. This is an unpopular opinion, or it's my own kind of thing. I like having at least 1 Gathering Storm when I play Fury just for the haste and the movement speed that you do get from it. And if you do switch to arms from Fury, you will have a trait that actually works for arms as well. So Gathering Storm, if you switch between Fury and arms, it's not that bad. I'd say it's a good trait, and if you don't have the gold to respec, then I'd suggest taking it. So let's talk about talents finally. I'd say talents are the most important thing about Fury Warrior. So let's go over the first row. For the first row, for the entire expansion, I've been taking Fresh Meat. Bloodthirst has a 15% increased chance to trigger Enrage, which increases damage and haste, and then heals you for 20% more. So right off the bat, you're just getting more heals whenever you Bloodthirst, and it has a higher chance to Enrage you. And Enrage obviously gives you a damage buff and increases your haste by 25%. If you don't take that, you can take Endless Rage, which I know people take in PvE sometimes. Would not suggest taking War Machine. It's not been good since they took the haste buff away from it. For the 30 row, this is pretty flexible too. If you take double time, I'd suggest taking Furious Charge with it. Or if you just want double time for the reduced cooldown and more charges, then, you know, be my guest. If you want the impending victory for, say, Arena, and you really need just the sudden burst of healing, then go for it. But this is like the least suggested talent I'd suggest taking. It's between Stormbolt and double time. Double time if you really need the gap closers of 2 charges, and then Stormbolt if you just need the stun onto healers. For the 45 row, it's really just Sudden Death here. I haven't taken Inner Rage ever, haven't taken Furious Slash ever. Sudden Death is usually just the best, because it obviously just gives you free execute procs. And we'll get into rotation later, but you can cleave with execute, and execute just does a shit ton of damage. So pretty much every time you're going to take Sudden Death. Go on to the 60 row. First, let's talk about the one I take in most scenarios. Warpaint I find is really good. You take 10% reduced damage while Enrage is active, and as a Fury Warrior, you'll find that Enrage is active for most of your rotation, especially if you're just spamming Bloodthirst, or just extending your Enrage with Raging Blow, but most of the time you're enraged, which means most of the time you'll be taking 10% reduced damage. You can take Bounding Stride if you really want. It does work well with the Barbarian Honor talent. Pretty much it reduces the cooldown of Heroic Leap and then gives you a 70% speed buff after using Heroic Leap. So there's the speed buff, and there's the cooldown on Heroic Leap being reduced. If you do take Barbarian, you will have technically 2 charges of Heroic Leap, but only for 3 seconds after you use the initial first charge. So if you need the mobility, say against mages, something that kites you forever, then Barbarian Bounding Stride, not a bad choice. For Battlegrounds, I find the most self-reliant talent choice here is Furious Charge or Warpaint. Furious Charge more so if you're just lacking healers, and Warpaint if your healers are good and you're just taking too much damage. If you use Furious Charge, you can charge someone. How much does Bloodthirst heal? It doesn't say. But anyway, it increases the healing of your Bloodthirst by 250%. So I'm guessing that's somewhere in the ballpark of 20% of your max health whenever you enraged, or whenever you charge and use Bloodthirst after with Furious Charge. Really good. I just made a Battleground video of using this build, and I went from 25% health to full health with Enraged Regen and Furious Charge in, I'd say, 5 seconds, 6 seconds, around there, with people on me. So it is really good for just self-healing. For the 75 row, I'd say it's between Massacre and Carnage. Carnage more so. I don't think I've ever gone out of Carnage on this row, but you can use Massacre if you really want the executes, or you run an arena comp with high execute pressure. But most of the time, Carnage. Reduced rage cost of Rampage, which is just nice in general, and then damage increase. I'd say the reason I take this, obviously damage increase, and reduced cost of Rampage, and then Rampage, obviously. It triggers your Enrage, and then your Enrage can reduce damage, and it also increases your damage, and it pretty much just increases the uptime of Enrage, and that's one of the main concepts of playing Fury Warrior these days. For the 90 row, I'd take Bladestorm every time. Unpopular opinion, it's either Dragon Roar or Bladestorm. I take Bladestorm because if you use Bladestorm correctly, you can kind of avoid CC, whether it be using Bladestorm when a rogue's about to kidney, while you're Frost Nova'd, general kind of crowd control like that, Bladestorm I think really pays off. But if you don't want to run Bladestorm, I'd suggest just running Dragon Roar. Just does a lot of damage and slows people. For the 100 row, I take Siegebreaker pretty much every time. I'm a sucker for increased damage percentage, and generally 30-second cooldown. Baseline damage of the ability is pretty decent. It's about a little bit higher than a Bloodthirst, and then it increases your damage for 10 seconds, with a downtime of 20 seconds. And the reason I say this is really good is because you can Whirlwind someone and then apply the damage debuff to multiple people around the target. And then that damage debuff will work very well with Bladestorm or any AoE abilities you do use. So the last row, it's pretty flexible. You can really take whatever here. If you want extended Recklessness, then go for it. If you want reduced cooldown on Recklessness, then go for it. But personally, I just like Siegebreaker. Going over Honor Talents real quick. A lot of the Fury Honor Talents are actually really good, so this is going to take longer than I'd like to admit. Because they all have their uses in like a really specific scenario. Death Sentence is good for when you need to execute a Resto Druid or anyone that kites you a lot. It pretty much makes it so your execute has a little 15-yard range charge whenever you do use it. I've explained the uses of Barbarian already. Battle Trance, it pretty much just increases your healing. Self-healing at least. So a lot of the times in Battlegrounds I'll switch between Battle Trance and the talents I'm currently slotted in. But Battle Trance, really good self-healing. If you haven't tried it, I'd suggest it. Thirst for Battle, I'd say, is the most OP thing for Fury Warrior. Bloodthirst clears all snares. So, Hamstring, Frost Mage Slow, Chains of Ice, any type of slow or snare, your Bloodthirst will clear it and then give you move speed. Really broken. I don't think I need to explain it that much more. Death Wish is a funny one. It increases your damage taken and done by 5%, stacking up to 10 times. If you have a pocket healer, then, you know, go for it. You'll be doing 50% increased damage at pretty much no repercussions. But if you don't have a pocket healer, you're probably just going to get melted once those stacks actually reach a somewhat notable level. So be careful on Death Wish if you do take it. Suggested that you have a Pocket Healer if you do take that Honor Talent. Spell Reflection, the one scenario, or a few scenarios where I think this can be pretty useful is against Destruction Warlock, reflecting Chaos Bolt, Fire Mage, reflecting Greater Pyro, and Demon Hunter, reflecting Rain from Above. That is the scenarios where I'd say Spell Reflection is good. Other than that, wouldn't really take it. Master and Commander, this would be good if you're running like an arena team and you need to use your commanding shout a lot, because it does just give max health, and you will be giving 30% of extra bonus max health on a 1-minute cooldown. Can be pretty useful, and is more of a defensive cooldown. Same thing goes with Disarm, just a defensive cooldown, and Disarm does what it says. It's a disarm. And then these are the two that I pretty much always run. Enduring Rage. Increases the duration of your enrage effect by 1 second, so it pretty much increases the duration of your haste increase and damage increase and possibly damage reduction. And then on top of that, your raging blows extend the duration of your enrage by 1.5 seconds. So if you're enraged, you use Raging Blow, that 4-second enrage will go to 5.5. And it pretty much just constantly refreshes your enrage. I always take this. The next one is Slaughterhouse. Again, I always take this talent. These talents don't change. I'm gonna be completely honest. These honor talents do not change unless I change out, like, Enduring Rage or Slaughterhouse for Battle Trance. But Slaughterhouse, Bloodthirst deals an additional 50% damage and healing when it hits a target under 50% health, so it kind of adds like an execute effect to your Bloodthirst, and it also reduces the cooldown by 1 second when you do use it on someone with under 50% health. I'll find myself in Battlegrounds using Bloodthirst on a target when they're below 50% health, and I'll have so much haste that I'll just be able to spam Bloodthirst and I have no need to use Raging Blow other than to extend my enrage. So, highly suggest the talents I take here, and then if you need to switch your honor talents around for certain scenarios, then there's a lot of options for you. Now we get into the fun stuff, guys. The fun stuff. The rotation. Let's talk about my essence real quick, or how I'd like to use my essence. The first use of Concentrated Flame is very negligible. Doesn't really do much. If you really need the healing, then it's okay, but usually it's the second use of it and the third use of it that really do damage. On the second use of it, let's see, 41,000 damage. That is reduced in PvP to about 30,000, but still quite a bit of damage for just pressing one button. Now on to the basic warrior rotation. Usually, I'll throw my essence in when I feel like I have downtime in my rotation. So if I don't have any Raging Blows, or when I'm usually pressing Whirlwinds, is when I'd use my essence Concentrated Flame. Let's go over the burst. Let's go over burst here. So the burst for Fury is something like this. You want to get to the point where you have Enrage. Now that I do have Enrage, I'll use my Warbreaker to increase the damage the target takes, and then pretty much spam Bloodthirst and Rampage on cooldown. You'll notice when I did get the Execute proc that I used it immediately. That is usually how you want to use the Execute proc, because it is really, really random when you do get that sudden death proc, but again, just got sudden death proc, pretty much use it instantly. And this is for more or less the rotation as a Fury Warrior. You press Bloodthirst whenever it's up, you press Raging Blow whenever you have nothing else to press, and Whirlwind is the button you press when you absolutely have nothing else to press. You'll notice when Warbreaker comes up, I usually just apply that immediately, because again, 15% damage increase. Whenever Bloodthirst is up, I use it immediately, and whenever I'm usually kind of getting towards the rage cap, I'll use my Rampage, or whenever it's really just lit up. I'll reference the downtime of the Fury Warrior rotation now when I was talking about essences. You'll notice there's little moments in my rotation where there's just really nothing else to press other than Whirlwinds, and that's when I'd use my essence. So let's talk about the AoE rotation. The AoE rotation for Fury Warrior, it's a lot of damage. It's a lot of damage and it's very simple. It is pretty much just doing the single target rotation of Fury Warrior, except every 2 abilities you use, you want to use Whirlwind. The reason behind this is because Whirlwind will make it so your abilities strike, I think it's 3 additional nearby targets or 4. I don't know which one, but Again, Whirlwinds just makes it so your abilities hit everyone nearby. It will make it so your sudden death executes also hit the nearby enemies, so that is something to take note of. And something to also take note of is that the trait, Cold Steel, whatever, the thing that puts up a dot, it can be applied to people in an AoE situation if you just do crit them with Bloodthirst when you use Whirlwind. Let's see if I can get another proc on multiple people here. Doesn't seem like we're too lucky. There we go. So you'll see I have one proc on that guy, one proc on that guy. It'll do the damage to both of them, but the healing will be doubled since there's 2 procs. Something to keep track of. And then, one of my favorite things about AoE with Fury Warrior is being able to go in, Rampage, Warbreaker, and then just Blade Storm. Because it is so much damage. And then after the Blade Storm, you obviously have that strength increase from the trait that I mentioned earlier. And most of the time, you want to be enraged when you are using that Blade Storm proc. But that's the AoE rotation. And in an AoE rotation, I wouldn't suggest using essences because your essence doesn't cleave people, and I think just your normal rotation of cleaving with Rampage and Raging Blow will do more damage in the long run than using essences in an AoE rotation. I'd say that's about it. Fury Warrior is pretty simple once you get the rotation down. Effectively, it's just trying to be enraged as much as you can when there's a lot of people around you, pressing Whirlwind every 2 buttons and then just doing your normal rotation. And then if you do get low on health and you are using your Furious Charge talents, you can charge in, Bloodthirst, leap out, and then charge back in just for like 2 immediate chunky heals. It's really fun. I'd say it's competitive. It's like an 8 out of 10 on class fun factor. Demon Hunters, I'd say like 9 out of 10, so I can't really think of anything that's 10 out of 10. I love it to death and nothing's wrong with it, but Fury Warrior's definitely up there for one of my favorite classes for the entire expansion. It's been fun for me. As always, guys, I hope you liked the video, hope you liked the PvP guide. If you did, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, check out Twitch, check out Twitter. Until next time, guys, take it easy.